Hello, my name is Anastasia Sprout. I have in the past gone by Stacy Sprout, and I am honored to be here today with three amazing colleagues of mine to launch a new endeavor called Real Recovery for All Women. And we are here with you today to talk about a specialty niche that we as clinical providers, we are therapists, coaches, et cetera, and we're going to each do our bios, have chosen to focus our life's work upon. And that is female sex and love addiction, porn addiction, relationship addiction, fantasy addiction. There's many names to call it. But this group came together originally on November 11th, 2021, and we launched a consultation group for providers of female sex and love addiction specialty care because I, as a provider, felt that this population needed attention. And so I'm going to read you my bio so you know a little bit about me. And I am a retired psychotherapist. I have a master of social work and retired certified sex addiction therapist. I'm in Sedona, Arizona at this time, and I have over 30 years experience as a social worker in a variety of settings, including community mental health, hospitals, private clinical practice, most recently. And my current practice has focused on individuals and groups and couples in recovery from sex, pornography, love, and relationship addictions. I wrote and published a book of my own story because I'm a recovering sex and love addict called Naked in Public, a memoir of recovery from sex addiction and other temporary insanities. And I am currently working as a coach in the areas of intimacy, sexual recovery, and I'm expanding my practice into helping survivors of organized extreme abuse, like satanic ritual abuse, trauma-based mind control, seeker space program, an advanced pedophile porn ring, organized abuse, etc. More information about me can be found on my website. I have a couple, and I'll put them in the comments. So that's me, and I want to yield some introductions from my colleagues here. Who else would like to jump in?
My name is Deborah Flanagan, and I'm a pastor, a pastoral sex addiction professional, and transformational coach. Currently, I'm working as a clinician for Pure Desire Ministries International. What I do is I use my 30 years of ministry experience and clinical training right now to help women recover from sex and love addiction and heal from relational trauma and attachment injuries. My passion has been in this area because I too am a recovering sex and love addict. I've been sober now for 30 years, and it has been a long road. And having gone through this myself, I feel a great connection and a passion for helping ladies work through this, from approaching it from the area, not so much about stopping behaviors as much as healing from the internal trauma that is causing these, which is your attachment injuries. So that's me. I live in Gresham, Oregon, which is just outside of Portland, with my husband Harry and our newly adopted orange tabby kitten.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Deborah.
Uh-huh.
I forgot to say I'm joined by Sparky Sprout behind me, but he's sleeping. So thank you so much. Who else wants to check in?
I can go next. I'm Deb, Deborah Wonderly. I go by Deb, and I am currently in West Virginia. I have 12 years of experience working with people in recovery from sex addiction. And I joined this group more or less at the beginning of it, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah.
And let's see. I'm fluent in English and Spanish. I am an author and am working on several different things simultaneously, which makes it take longer. So I also have been facilitating groups for people for women recovering from betrayal trauma, and groups for people that want to increase their understanding and practice of being able to be intimate emotionally and physically with their partners. I worked with people from many different backgrounds, and have really been on my own healing journey as well, simultaneously through all of this. I think my focus, I'm a certified trauma recovery coach. My focus is creating a safe place where we can cultivate intimacy with ourselves, with other people, and with a spiritual source of higher power, whether that be a God or some other source of power greater than oneself. I work with people that are strongly believing in a certain faith, and I also work with people that are that don't have any or are strongly atheist. So it's kind of across the board, kind of flexible. And I really like two of the things that I really like are nonviolent communication and internal family systems, working with parts. And for me, personifying my emotions and dialoguing with them has been very, very helpful. And it's been really helpful for the people that I work with too. And I'm also, over the past couple of years, learning a lot about extreme abuse, organized abuse, and endeavors to support people that fit that description as well. And I think that's it for now. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Deb.
I guess it's my turn.
Yep.
So my name is Rika Matoba Lopez. I am a licensed marriage family therapist and a CSAC, and I'm Japanese American, born and raised in LA. So I live in Southern California currently. And I've been in the mental health field for over 15 years. And I recently joined the CSAC community. And so I work with men and women dealing with sexually addictive behaviors like pornography and love relationship addiction. And with couples, I work on betrayal trauma. So spouses who've been cheated on or lied to due to their pornography addiction or sexually addictive behaviors. And yeah, my heart really is for the Asian American community because there is such a there's a lot of shame, a lot of taboo when it comes to mental health issues. And I believe I think me and another gal is the only Japanese American female therapist in the CSAC community. So there really is a huge need for voices like mine. And I really want to advocate for especially churches. Again, there's a huge shame cycle there where you don't talk about anything that's embarrassing or, shameful, especially sexually addictive behaviors. And so my heart really is for people in the church, even, pastors' wives, and leaders in the church that are struggling with porn addiction and betrayal trauma as well. So that's, a bit about me. And I also have a huge heart for Japan because that's my upbringing or my background. And so in Japan too, I mean, there's just a huge, I think there's not enough mental health resources there or even therapists. And so, missionaries in Japan, maybe interracial marriages too. I really have a heart for. So, and also currently I am leading a love addiction group for my church. I guess you could call it women's intimacy group. So we meet once a month and it's for women who are dealing with love addiction traits. And so it's become a very safe space for a lot of the women to be able to just share vulnerably. And I just love what we've cultivated. And so my heart also is for a lot of the women there in the church dealing with love addictive behaviors. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to get to be in the circle with you. We meet every week and we talk about how we try to deliver the best quality of care to females who are struggling with intimacy issues, particularly sex, love, relationship addiction, pornography addiction, and the intimacy. And I so appreciate all of you speaking from your heart. This is where my heart goes. And I'm curious if there's anything else anyone wants to say about how you specifically got into this niche. I think Deborah kind of led us off with this, relating to women, because many of us do treat men and women, families, couples, etc. But what is it about women that has drawn you to this, being of service and kind of, again, our focus? So I'll say for me, I did not really like women. I didn't really want to work with women. As a recovering sex addict myself, I was afraid of women. I felt like they were competition. And I felt very hurt, deeply hurt by my relationship with my mother and also females in my family. And so I didn't understand what I was missing in terms of the idea of connecting with women in a tender, vulnerable, mutually supportive, and mutually protective place. And so over time, I got to experience that more and more. And then as a recovering person who just loves to educate, I was talking about my story and people said, well, you should help women. You're a woman. I almost didn't feel, I was like, oh, okay. And so I was sort of drawn by service into this population. And I found it a very difficult population to treat, even though thankfully, and I'll come back to my heart, I was given love, like love started to bubble out. And I was like, oh, I started to see with compassion the stories of others as I could see it with myself. And I do think it's a barrier for providers to help female sex and love addiction, and those struggling with it because they've been hurt by women. They may have been hurt or abused by a female sex and love addict in their past. And, so that was part of my journey of looking at self-forgiveness and like risking being vulnerable. And then also the other thing is, because I was a female recovering person and a clinician, everyone in the whole area geographically where I was in Seattle at the time started sending me all their clients because they didn't want to work with them. And they didn't know how, they were scared, it was too difficult. And, I do have a class series. I don't mean to make this an infomercial, but I have a class series on top 10 struggles and strategies of professionals who work with female sex and love addiction. And I do want to say that there are significant barriers to treat this population. So what is it that has helped you jump over those barriers and come into this specialty? Any more that you want to say?
Yeah, that really reminds me too. Being a recovering addict for 30 years, when I first started recovery, there was really practically nothing for female addicts.
Mhm.
The pathway, at least in the church, and of course I come from a faith-based Christian perspective, is that especially in the church, there was nothing except men's materials. The men had this, certain criteria and they had certain recovery efforts. So we started using that just as a basis. And then I started discovering that it just wasn't enough. It wasn't quite addressing my issues and the things that I felt I needed. And that's where I gravitated towards your work, Anastasia, and learned from there, learned from other people and said, there's more to recovery for women, or different. There's a different approach for dealing with women, and then adding on top of that for Christian women. And so I started melding everything together, which has really formed and informed how I help ladies through this, both clinically and biblically. What does it mean to renew the mind, for instance, or your identity as a person, and how to set the right boundaries, and all of those trauma issues that we deal with that have caused addiction or led us into addictive behaviors. So that's what led me in. It's maybe more of a cerebral kind of thing, where it was more like, I see a need, and because I saw the need in me and saw that certain steps I took was helpful, and I passed it on in groups and things, and then also did my own studies. And I then I went to the International Institute of Trauma and Addiction Professionals and realized how much more I had to learn, and I got the certification there. And then since then, I've done a lot of trauma certifications as well, to sort of broaden this idea that it's because of trauma that leads us to addiction, that it's not just stopping this behavior that's going to help. The whole life comes with that. But yeah, I got into it because there was nothing available. We had to create it from the ground up. So
Yeah. Thank
Mhm.
you. Anybody else?
I would say for me, also service has kind of drawn me in. My own recovery has put me in contact with amazing women, and I started to hear stories that just really were kind of heartbreaking, that they weren't feeling like they were getting the help that they needed as well, that they there are differences. There are many similarities. I think I see sex addiction as a spectrum, but I think a lot of times female-bodied people just experience things differently and have different tendencies, and it's important to understand when these people are falling through the cracks and they need help, and it's important for us to understand how to meet them where they're at, and to bring healing to them. You know, if they come to us, we can meet in the middle, but it's just really important that there be something available for people who don't relate to some of the other stuff that's out there.
Thank you.
I remember when smartphones first came out, immediately my first concern was, oh no, there's gonna like be porn everywhere. Like people can access just clicking right here, you know, right in the palm of their hands. And I just it just enraged me, I think. I just felt like I wanted to protect all the young people, and especially because I have two boys, I was like, oh no, the kids are gonna get access to it. And so I think for me, I really maybe that's that mother side of me where I just really want to educate a lot of the younger generation, because I mean I'm hearing, you know, kids as young as 7 or 8 are already watching porn, or they are exposed to it. And so that just it really alarms me. And I just want to get as much resources out there as possible, for all ages really, and to psychoeducate parents too, and have you know, for them to be able to access helpful resources and materials. And so I just want to learn as much as I can and be able to, yeah, be resourceful to the community.
Thank you so much. And I'm so grateful. One of the most wonderful things about this weekly consultation that we have, and there's a few others who couldn't be with us today that will be coming subsequently, and we'll be hearing about what they're doing, is just watching and getting to hear about the projects that you all are creating in your communities. It's just amazing to hear about the church support groups and the presentations, Rika, that you've put on, and Deb, so many things. You're doing it, one of the only groups for ritual abuse and mind control that's out there. There's almost no groups that are out there, and you're helping to conduct that. And Deborah, so many things with Pure Desire that you're creating, co-creating, and there's so that really this theme of we kind of are on the front of trying to create resources, because it's just not easy to do. And so thank you for your courage and your heart and your hard work. And thank you also to those who have come before us, some mentors for me, Kelly McDaniel for sure, Marty Faree, Alex Katahakis, International Institute of Trauma Addiction Professionals, and so many more. So hopefully there's others who will take the baton from us and just create many resources to blossom out there. I do want to put in a few talking points related to female sex and love addiction, kind of as a specialty population. Like, what is it that what is it? So from some powerful research that's, not brand new, but I think still very important to cite Marnie Free and Making Advances. They showed that almost twice as many women will self-identify as a love addict or a relationship addict as opposed to a sex addict. That shame is a key part of all addiction, as well as failed attempts to stop. And so that combination can be very, very difficult for women. Can't stop and can't tell anyone, don't want to talk about it. Sexual oppression and other forms of oppression, economic, racial, etc., is rampant for women, women-bodied people. It is a factor in love and sex addiction, a core shame for intimacy needs, shame for sexual desire, a core shame just for being a woman and being in a woman's body. And that shame, again, is a silencer. Also, this concept culturally of sexploitation as liberation, or what I call sexual liberation gaslighting, to trick girls and young women into thinking that self-exploitation is empowered, and really erasing the conversation about heart-centered relationship with one's body, love-based relationships with others, and exploration of physical touch, starting from a place of love, generosity, and innocence for the purpose of bonding, as opposed to getting off. That people do not understand women's sexual experience often, and they can be quick to judge what that is, therefore it's not safe to share. And all of this kind of goes into a soup of limited information and resources directly oriented toward women's sexual healing and experience. And of course, I didn't say, but I'll say more specifically, the sexual abuse of girls and women, both directly sexual abuse in their body, we call overt sexual abuse, and then a society of massive covert or hidden sexual abuse, including normalized sexual harassment, normalized exploitation, just as a way of life. And so, Rika, you talked about the handheld cell phone, smartphone, the rampant pornography, just normalized in society. And then the porn-driven behaviors in sex, for example, strangulation, things that we've spoken about as a group, and we'll be talking more about. So I want to we have a little bit of time left. So I just want to ask if there's anything I'm missing of some key points in this population, or comments that anyone wants to share.
There's something else that I wanted to bring up really kind of briefly. I mentioned that sex addiction can be seen as a spectrum, or kind of a wide variety of different manifestations, and sexual anorexia is part of that. One wouldn't think that it would belong there, because we usually think of sex addiction as excessive, compulsive, acting out behaviors, as we would call them, but also the avoidance of sex and closeness can be a compulsive behavior as well, and addictive as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I remember first really you coming into my radar when you gave a workshop in Seattle, Washington on intimacy avoidance and sexual anorexia and the idea of sexual restriction. And I remember thinking, oh, I probably have that one too. I don't want to go, it's because, like you said, the spectrum, either the excess or the restriction, and the compulsion there related to the shame, and especially for women who are sexually abused, which so many are. So thank you so much for that reminder. What else am I
I
forgetting?
think in addition to that, when Deb was talking about the spectrum, I remember seeing a slide in one of the ITAP trainings that sex addiction, there's all these labels underneath. So it's all very interchangeable, with sexual anorexia being one. And I believe there was also intimacy disorder, attachment disorder, trauma bonding, and also like love, porn, sex, relationship addiction. So those are all labels that, yeah, I guess they're very similar, a lot of those meanings. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you, because I think if we were orienting a program just toward women, we would invert that. We would not put sex addiction as an umbrella concept, because that's the doorway that women typically don't want to walk through. So we talk about, and I learned this from the Meadows Treatment Center and how they did their website and their Willow House program, is the issue of intimacy issues. And that's the doorway that many women can they're like, well, yeah. And it's, so yes, great points. Really great. What else?
I also want to mention it can be challenging as practitioners because some of this is not listed specifically in the book that um, people with licenses use to diagnose things. For example, sexual anorexia is not in the DSM. That doesn't make it not a thing. It just means that insurance can't cover it.
Yeah, hidden, right? Yeah. So we are about talking about these things and saying we see them in the clients that come to us for mental health help or intimacy help or sexual help, and how, so one of the things we talked about before is just compassion for women going through this, for sure. And I hope that runs through this whole series. So we're planning a series of these talks on specific topics. This is kind of the introductory kickoff, but also compassion for providers who, as Rika, again, you mentioned, you're one of 2 Asian American providers in the ITAP community. Like, I'm like so shocked by that, but yet I'm not. When you talk about the cultural embedded shame and then, Deb approaching from a Christian perspective as a pastor, the shame that can be embedded in religion, the anorexia goes unseen, this is like, so we're just trying to get this on the table, but also, I mean, is there anything else that you might want to share as a provider for other providers related to this work?
Oh,
Yeah,
Anastasia, sorry, just wanted to correct you that I believe me and another therapist were the only Japanese American female CSATs. I think there's a lot of I don't know a lot, but there's a good number of Asian American, but Japanese American to be specific. I think me and another gal is the only ones.
Thank you for correcting me. And I want to pay more attention to what you are saying so that I can get this accurate. And okay, thank you.
yeah, yeah. I just wanted to say too, is that, I also work with a lot of betrayed partners, and and exploring not just their trauma, but exploring their sexuality has been important too. And I mean, I'm kind of in the field, so they do talk about it, but when they start exploring their sexuality, they see some wounds there as well. And I think that would be important if you just, if you're a generalist or a therapist that, somebody comes with some anxiety disorder, is to, as you explore some of their anxiety things, is to also explore their sexuality. Don't be afraid to ask them about your physical health, what's going on mentally or cognitively or spiritually, or just some of those other areas besides just their mental, their feelings, in other words, that we're a whole body. And I look at sex and love addiction kind of separate. So I look at sex addiction a little bit differently in treatment than I do with love addiction, but a lot of times they're both. But when we focus on one at a time, it gives them this sense of accomplishment when they've been sober for 70 days. Now let's look at this other aspect. So that's just my experience in helping ladies.
Thank you. Well, we are going to be covering some topics as we expand this series. And we came up with this idea, RRAW, Real Recovery for All Women. And again, the focus is on sexuality. I think that's an intimacy, and not at the exclusion of other kinds of addictive processes, whether it's substance abuse or action addictions, if you will, or the restriction family of the constriction. I think of fight or flight or freeze, in the way that's manifests through behaviors and substances. So I wanted to just lay out some of the topics, and these topics are things that have emerged from our conversations as a collective over the years. They keep coming up over and over with our clients, and they inspire us to passion, sometimes outright fury, as was mentioned, just going into this outrage about what's happening to girls and women, and but also the tenderness, the care, the sorrow that we feel in seeing the horrible things that they go through and have to go through, and wanting to support the prevention of that as much as we can, and the treatment of that, and the care of that. And more than anything, just even just understanding, like, this is real, this happens to women, this matters, we care about this, and let's talk about it. And we want to see more resources out there. We really do. So thanks for letting me speak for the collective. This is what I've seen over our conversations over time. So some of the topics that we're going to be getting into, and I think our first one for next week is going to be about a paper that many of us co-authored. And that is a paper that's called Porn as a School for Sexual Violence. And it's kind of the culturally approved harm for girls that is perpetrated by pornography, harm for girls and women. And this was inspired and lead authored by Ali Dearborn, who'll be joining us. And many of us supported her in that endeavor. The paper was submitted to the United Nations, and it was actually cited multiple times in the ultimate broad paper that was created on the cultural harms for girls and women and violence against girls and women. And so I'm really proud of that. And we're going to be talking about that paper, what the findings are, and the impact on girls and women of pornography. So that's one topic. Another one is the topic which we've had some great discussions on about masturbation and women, self-pleasuring, many things to call it, self-stimulation, self-love. Is it shameful? Is it wrong? Is it bad? Is it a sin? When is it out of balance? Is it positive? Is it life affirming? Is it fantastic? And just really looking at the nuances of that topic. Another that we've talked about has to do with gender confusion and beauty norms, and the kind of pressure that girls are under now in terms of how they present themselves to the world and how they deal with the issue of beauty. Another is the topic of love addiction. So Deborah, you talked a little about sex addiction and love addiction. We separate them out somewhat. They're not exactly the same, even though FSLA, female sex and love addiction, is kind of, in the 12-step programs that may combine them or separate them. But as treatment providers, we can, what do we see in terms of specifically love addiction? And sometimes we have struggled with that term, looking at, does it pathologize love for women? And so what is that? Another topic that we've had some great discussions involve the term sex work versus the terms looking at the sex trade, sex trafficking, prostitution, and how does all of that combine, or what does it mean for maybe especially young women coming into trying to have their own self and self-definition, but at the same time, are we, how do we not enable something that is harmful, destructive, or abusive, and just, kind of having conversations about that. A couple others that we've talked about, women and sexual abuse, just really getting it on the table. What's going on with sexual abuse with women, and let's talk about it. We've talked about male partners of female sex addicts somewhat, and looking at that very hidden population, even though technically this is the male population, they're very affected by the female sex and love addiction, and wanting to see resources created for them as well. As we work with women in recovery from these issues, we also really care about what's happening for their partners, and that may be female partners or male partners, but so we can be looking at that issue. Also, the vulnerabilities of being a therapist in this population, being a male therapist, working with female sex and love addicts, being a female therapist. We are all females in this collective. Males are welcome too, but so far we've all been females. And just what are some of the particular dangers or pitfalls? We touched on a little bit today, but when you're dealing with women who struggle with intimacy disorders, they may sexualize intimacy, they may romanticize trust. And how does that show up in the therapy room? How do attractions, take place? What do we do about those? healthy boundaries for therapists to set with this population that really struggles to set them with them for themselves, where crossing boundaries may be a conquest instead of, an intrusion. There's so many other topics that we have covered, but these are some of the notable ones. Are there, and I will ask all of you what I'm forgetting. Actually, I would love, just even Rika, from our interaction today, the issue of race in providing clinical care, in when society is not represented in a balanced way, racism, if just the, my mistake of associating what you said about being a provider who has a heart for your own experience as a Japanese American woman, and then conflating that with Asian American women. It's like, oh, darn it, I made that mistake. And how do we make mistakes, and how do we reconcile those issues in terms of race with our clients? Other topics that I'm forgetting. Oh, I know one more. Sex. Healthy sex, like fabulous sex, like not abuse, not distortions, not things out of balance. Like we've talked about Come As You Are, the book that was Emily Nagoski, if I'm saying that right. And we've talked about Carezza, Marnia Robbins's work, Cupid's Poison Arrow. Those have been some very lively discussions. So I'd like to cover those if we have momentum and energy and time. Sexual anorexia, certainly, sexual restrictions, as we've mentioned today. What else?
All of that, plus the Christian perspective, we've talked a lot, or the spiritual connection to sexuality. And that's part of our identity and who we are as women. And I'm passionate about that. So
Thank you. Yes. And there is some touching on that in Marnia Robinson's work in terms of Carezza, but also I'm thinking about one of my former supervisors, Gina Ogden, who passed away, but her work on the 4 quadrants and just, yes, the spirit of sex, the soul of sex, looking at that. Thank you.
Did we also talk about like BDSM, like
Oh yeah. How could I
like
forget
the
that?
choking trend? And yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's been a
Okay.
passionate conversation for us, is BDSM as a fetish and kind of a fun kink versus BDSM as abuse, and looking at that tension. Appreciate that reminder. So this and more we will see. And if you are watching this and you are interested in any of these topics, please give a comment on our YouTube comments about what you'd like to see us cover first, because as you can hear, there's many that we can cover. And how do we choose? I think we'll do the porn paper because we many of us co-wrote that paper and it's really exciting. But as far as the other topics, we would love to engage with an audience out there of women who are in recovery, of men who love them, of providers who are interested in these topics. Let us know what you want to hear about, and we'll see if we can engage some real conversation. So I think that wraps us up today. Is there anything else that I'm forgetting?
I can't think of anything. It's kind of went well. And, yeah, I'd really enjoy hearing comments. So please comment below about some of the questions you might have about your sex life, or your sex practices, your sexuality, and or your struggles. And we'd love to give you that inside scoop, and we just talk authentically about it. Yeah.
Well, any last words before we close?
Yeah.
Thank you for watching.
Yes. You made it this far.
Yeah.
I'm excited that we're starting this, and I look
Yeah.
forward to many more.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Me too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.